for nearly a year, Dr. Anthony Fauci talked little about the coronavirus lab leak theory, right? We know that, but did he pressure other scientists to do the same? You got a new report in USA Today. It reveals that a secret meeting happened in February 2020 to discuss COVID origins. Prior to that meeting, infectious disease expert Dr. Christian Anderson told Fauci the virus may have been engineered. But just days after the meeting, the article reveals that Anderson miraculously switched his point of view, suggesting the lab leak is a fringe crackpot theory. So what happened? Here now is Steve Hilton, who's been all over this from day one. You know that from his show on The Next Revolution, Sundays at 9. And Lara Logan, host of Lara Logan Has No Agenda on Fox Nation. You see them a lot together. They're back together for us tonight. First off, does this story surprise you, Steve?
Well, no, because it's typical of the pattern of behavior we've seen from Fauci all along. So we now know, thanks to those emails that were released, that right at the beginning of this, he was told that it looked very much like this was an engineered virus. He then now says in an interview, oh, I took that seriously. I convened a meeting. We had an open discussion. He says that now that the emails are out there. But at the time, and for the last year, he hasn't said anything like that. He's been completely happy for the whole lab leak theory to be dismissed as a conspiracy. And the reason that he's been dodging and deflecting and specifically lying to Congress, as he did to Rand Paul about all this, is because he knows he's got a guilty conscience to protect. He is guilty because we know, whatever you call it, whether it's gain of function research, you can argue about the label, there's been this dispute about that. There is no dispute about the specific experiments that Fauci commissioned starting in 2014. They were to take bat coronaviruses to enhance their transmissibility, to make them airborne, and to make them infect the human respiratory system. That's specified in the documents coming from Fauci's institute going to Wuhan. On top of that, we have public documents, and have had for months now, we've been airing these, which show the progress reports, which confirm that they carried out those experiments in the lab with the commission that Fauci gave them. And the final point I'd add to this is people say, well, how can Fauci, the great savior of the nation and the world through the pandemic, why would he do something like this? In his own words, back in 2011, he wrote in the Washington Post that it is a risk worth taking, in his words, to engineer a potentially dangerous virus in the laboratory. He thinks this is useful. It's an experiment that went totally wrong, and he's wriggling because he knows he's guilty.
And, Steve, by the way, just on that meeting, they all agreed to keep what was talked about in that meeting in confidence. So we'll never know. Laura, today, on everything that Steve knows, I know you have something to go on with that. But today it came out, and yesterday as well, the Chinese are saying, we want an investigation of the Americans. The Americans might have started this whole pandemic. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the Chinese are playing their strongest card because the Americans did have a hand in this. And as precisely as Steve said, this goes back not just to 2015 or 14 or 13. This goes way back to 2002. Coronaviruses were not originally transmittable to human beings. That was before the first SARS outbreak. And Dr. Fauci was funding gain-of-function research through NIAID long before it was farmed out to the Wuhan lab. What Americans really need to understand is that gain-of-function research was being carried out at North Carolina's Chapel Hill University long before it was farmed out to the Wuhan lab, right? That happened because it was deemed so dangerous that's why it was banned by Congress, and that's why Fauci pushed it abroad to the Chinese. So the Chinese know that their best defense is to point a finger at the U.S. because the U.S. does have their hands dirty. And what Fauci has done is spin a web of lies and cover-ups, cover-up over cover-up over cover-up. It's like peeling back an onion. He's counting on the fact that we're going to peel back the first layer and find the first cover-up, and we're going to give up, right? Everybody's going to say, okay, well, you know, we proved that China was involved. But actually what he's hiding is that he was involved long before this, and there's a much deeper, darker cover-up at play here.
Yeah. It almost reminds me of, Steve, when we found out about the economy collapsing. We didn't really know what Wall Street was up to. We are now finding what science was up to. But go ahead.
Exactly. And I think Laura is exactly right. And then to further add to her point, I think the thing we need to zero in on now in respect of Fauci's behavior is the fact that, as Laura said, this was regulated because it was so dangerous. This was controlled. You had both the Obama administration put a complete ban on this in 2014, and you had the Trump administration lift the ban but replace it with a very tough regulation of this, so that any experimentation of this kind had to be flagged for a specific review. Fauci went around both of those restrictions. That's where I think we've got him, because that is professional misconduct of the highest order. There's an IG investigation for the HHS now. I don't know if that's going to be a cover-up too. We need to focus on the question, did Fauci go around the regulations that were in place by the previous administration and the Trump administration to push this research that he was such a champion of?
All right, Steve, we're going to see you at 9 o'clock Eastern. You'll build on this. Go ahead, Laura.
Always.
Yes.
We'll get him in the end.
So what I would add to what Steve is saying is, because he's completely right about everything that he just said, and there's another part to this. How did that virus, why was it carried back here in 2015 to the University of North Chapel, to the laboratory there, to Dr. Ralph Barrick? He also needs to be in the hot seat here.
Right. And by the way, we will continue to follow this. We're going to look forward to July 11th for another reason. You got a brand new season on Fox Nation. Privacy in the digital age, man, is that apropos? And just for the record, Laura, you can back me up on this. Dan Bongino's now got a show on the weekend. He also doesn't wear a tie or a collar. Steve, you were there first. He is copying you. All right. You were there first. Bongino's trying to be like Hilton. That's the story we're going to run with this weekend.
Can you do
Laura,
it,
thanks so
Brian?
much,
And
guys.
he's trying to lose the hair as well.
Are you next?
He's copying my hairstyle.
Right. That is true. I don't know if I'm next, Laura. I only feel comfortable when I'm wearing a tie. I even wear it to bed. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it. All right, coming up straight ahead.